I was really looking forward to seeing what Democrats would roll out on Monday morning to assassinate Amy Coney Barrett's character. Since her nomination at the end of September, they've been curiously signaling surrender. Oh, we don't have the votes. We can't stop this confirmation. Maybe we can delay it a little bit, but we're out of any options that'll change the outcome. Okay, yeah, right. Come on, dudes. You didn't have the numbers last time around either, but that didn't stop you from putting on the show. You're the guys who gave us anatomical vocabulary lessons from Garth.
Indelible in the hippocampus.
You're the guys who made a porn star and a convict improbable heroes of integrity. You're the guys who developed and perfected the accusations so general, you're not even sure who you're accusing or of what.
If Brett Kavanaugh was one of those people that did this to me, there is no way in the world that he should go scot-free on this and that he should be on the Supreme Court.
So no way Democrats were just going to lay down for this. I have faith in their creativity, but at bare minimum, they have to at least complete the story arc from the last chapter and accuse Amy of running a forcible insemination camp where women serve their only purpose of unwillingly carrying children to term before they're executed when they're no longer useful. So here I am, sitting at the edge of my seat on Monday morning, eager to see what they have this time. And over the course of the hours, I slowly end up slumped back in my chair in boredom, because if the first 2 days of hearings are any indicator, the reports were actually correct. They got nothing, or at least nothing expectedly scandalous. We all expected the cover story of the Inquirer. Instead, we got a boring policy debate buried in the back half of the Wall Street Journal. The best Democrats had was to put up pictures of sick people from their states and imply that Amy Coney Barrett wants to take away their health insurance and dance upon their shallow peasant graves. At least the grave dancing part was implied. It was not implied that Barrett would do the legal part of that work, however. In fact, it was stated that Barrett was selected specifically to overturn the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare, because there's a case upcoming to the Supreme Court challenging that law, scheduled to begin arguments November 10th.
I believe the reason you were chosen is precisely because your judicial philosophy, as repeatedly stated, could lead to the outcomes President Trump has sought.
And this is obviously the case. It's what any objective observer can see.
Senator Cornyn and all of our colleagues on this committee are pushing to get this nominee on by November 10th, the time needed to strike down the Affordable Care Act. And colleagues pretend this isn't about the ACA. Right.
It's others who did a secret backroom deal and not you guys who were in 100% lockstep with every member of your caucus repeating the talking point.
Most importantly, health care coverage is at stake.
Overturn the Affordable Care Act.
Abolish the ACA.
Judicial torpedo aimed at their essential protections.
Your health care is on the line.
Repeal the Affordable Care Act.
Taking away people's health care.
To take health care away.
End the Affordable Care Act.
Get rid of the Affordable Care Act.
And even if there was some secret deal, in that case, good news for you, Chuck Grassley did you the service of getting Amy Coney Barrett to perjure herself.
The Democrats claim that you're being put on the Supreme Court so you can vote to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Is that your agenda?
Absolutely not. I was never asked, and if I had been, that would have been a short conversation.
Seems like a pretty big hole in the plot, but I'm sure it's all part of the bigger plan, the scheme that you'll expose in the coming days. It's boring, it's not true, it's not even clear it's a political winner. Polling on the Affordable Care Act has always been a pretty even partisan split, but that's what they're going with. And in pursuit of it, Democrats made a series of incoherent and self-defeating arguments. The predictable fawnings for Ruth Bader Ginsburg were frequent throughout the hearing, praising her for her ideological drive.
This is a judgeship that was held by an icon who voted to protect your health care, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. A woman who never took no for an answer.
The legacy of Justice Ginsburg, who dedicated her life to fighting for gender equality.
The legacy of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She fought for equality, equity, and dignity.
But if Amy Coney Barrett were to take her own ideological drive to the court, oh no, that would be awful. That would be judicial activism, and we stand on principle against legislating from the bench.
You've been vetted. You've been screened by the Trump administration and special interests. They want someone who will legislate from the bench and strike down laws supported by a vast majority of the American people.
What if I told you that the court deciding cases based on public opinion is legislating from the bench? Judging from the bench means deciding cases based on the law and the law alone, not majority whim or anyone's whim for that matter. And that's Barrett's whole philosophy if you could bother to wait 5 minutes to hear her describe it, but you won't Before she even uttered a word, you already dismissed her.
I will oppose your nomination.
But even more confusingly, Blumenthal makes this argument against legislating from the bench with an impassioned defense of judicially legislated rights.
And sadly, it's not just the Affordable Care Act that's at stake. It's a woman's right to decide when and how to have a family, control over her own body.
Notice how slyly the right to an abortion is characterized as the right to plan your family. Nobody's intervening with anybody's right to get pregnant or not whenever you want. It's when the life is created that's the issue. But more to the point, the Constitution is silent on that issue, which means the issue is properly reserved to the states. The so-called constitutional right to an abortion was legislated from the bench, but somehow that's an argument against Barrett potentially legislating from the bench. More incoherent still, Blumenthal says legislating from the bench is bad, but so is applying the explicit terms of the Constitution. Amy Coney Barrett threatens his state's gun laws.
An activist judge on the bench would also strike down common sense gun safety laws. Connecticut has been at the forefront on gun violence protection. But if your views on the Second Amendment are adopted by the Supreme Court, it would imperil common sense state laws like Connecticut's.
It's not Barrett's views that imperil Connecticut gun laws. It's the Second Amendment that imperils Connecticut's gun laws. It's the text of the document. You just said we have to uphold rights that aren't actually written in the Constitution, and now you're saying the ones that are don't matter. Speaking of pre-existing conditions, I now have one from trying to follow this reasoning. You can't legislate from the bench. You have to apply the law as written, which means we protect the stuff we just made up and inserted into the Constitution, but disregard the text that's actually in there. And if you disagree, well, that's because you're the one who wants to turn your whims into policy. And the arguments were just as confused about the proper balance of power between the federal government, state government, and the individual. Amy Klobuchar characterized Barrett as someone who wants to seize control of every aspect of your life.
A justice whose views are known and who will have a profound impact on your life, where you can go to school, who you can marry, decisions you can make about your own body.
Okay, well, if centralized power is such a worry, why are we picking this fight in favor of centralizing control of healthcare? This judge wants to control every aspect of your life by removing things from federal control and kicking it back to you and your state to handle for yourselves. Is centralized control good or bad? Before you can ask Barrett for her views, philosophically or legally, you do have to pick one yourself. But most frustratingly, if you listen to these Democratic arguments and criticisms and you make what sense of them you can, the logical conclusion is you should want an originalist. You should want someone who strives to remove her personal views and apply the law as written. Barrett described this philosophy early in Tuesday's hearing.
You're an originalist, is that true? What does that mean in English?
That means that I interpret the Constitution as a law, that I interpret its text as text, and I understand it to have the meaning that it had at the time people ratified it.
Okay.
So that meaning doesn't change over time, and it's not up to me to update it or infuse my own policy views into it.
If you're worried about a judge imposing her own views on policy into court decisions, regardless of what the law says, you should want someone who says, I set aside my own views, even if it leads to outcomes I don't like, because that's what fidelity to the law means.
A judge must apply the law as it is written, not as she wishes it were. Sometimes that approach meant reaching results that he did not like. But as he put it in one of his best-known opinions, that is what it means to say that we have a government of laws and not of men.
If you're worried about a judge scooping up power, you should want someone who understands the limitations of her role and doesn't try to exceed them, even when doing so may be viewed as moral or heroic.
Judges can't just wake up one day and say, I have an agenda, I like guns, I hate guns, I like abortion, I hate abortion, and walk in like a royal queen and impose, their will on the world. Courts are not designed to solve every problem or right every wrong in our public life. The public should not expect courts to do so, and courts should not try.
And if you're worried that perspective lacks compassion for the struggling human beings you're using as intellectual shields for your incoherent, contradictory faux philosophy, you should want someone who understands the virtue of compassion as a personal quality, but also understands that compassion is not a judicial philosophy, and compassion is not the law.
When I write an opinion resolving a case, I read every word from the perspective of the losing party. I ask myself how I would view the decision if one of my children was the party that I was ruling against. Even though I would not like the result, would I understand that the decision was fairly reasoned and grounded in law?
And just in case you doubt that any of that is authentic, just in case you think it's rehearsed or an act, you should want all of these statements from someone who's speaking from the mind and from the heart, not from a prepared list of talking points.
You know, most of us have multiple notebooks and notes and books and things like that in front of us. Can you hold up what you've been referring to in answering our questions? Is there anything on it?
That letterhead that says United States Senate.
But of course, none of that matters because none of this is actually about philosophy. None of this is about principle. None of this is about consistency or the rule of law. It's just about the politics of getting the outcome you like and stopping any action of a president you don't. And actually, that's fine in the legislature. Generally speaking, that is the job of a member of Congress, to represent the will of his constituents, even if that will is total nonsense. The role of the court is not to implement public passions, however. The role of the court is simply to ensure that our passionate fights are handled by the same evenly applied rules, applied as they were written, not as the court wants them to be. Anything else makes the court a participant in those fights rather than a referee. Based on the arguments Democrats are presenting, we should all agree on that role. And we should all agree that Barrett is saying the right things about it. But I know that we won't. And I know she'll be confirmed. And I know none of this will matter regardless, because after the way Democrats bastardized this process the last time around, nobody buys their authenticity this time anyway. Still, I really wanted to see their show just from an entertainment perspective, but I guess I'm not going to get that. Or maybe this actually is the show. Maybe the Kavanaugh circus was really just the warm-up to the most elaborate, scandalous, and inventive lie yet. That Democrats actually stand for constitutionalism, limited government, and the impartial rule of law. Now that is a totally outrageous claim. That's one that belongs on Springer, not C-SPAN. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Give it a